The bridge of the Pioneer was filled with quiet tension. Captain Jake Morrison stared at the screen in front of him. His gray hair was cut short, and his face showed the lines of a man who had seen many difficult days. He was 45 years old and had spent most of his life working in the dangerous asteroid mines. On the screen, 36 alien ships floated in space beyond Mars. Each ship was 10 times bigger than the Pioneer. Jake had never seen anything like them before. No human had. Lieutenant Amy Carson sat at the communication station. She was 30 years old with steady hands and a calm voice, but Jake could see the fear in her eyes. She looked at him and said quietly, "Captain, they are calling us again." Jake took a deep breath. "Put them through," he said. The screen changed. An alien appeared. It had 4 arms and skin that looked like crystal. Light seemed to bend around it in strange ways. Its eyes glowed with an inner fire. When it spoke, a computer translated its words into English. "I am High Legate Zrath of the Velcoran Empire. We have studied your species. You are acceptable for client status. You will surrender now and join our economic system. This is not a discussion. This is an order." Jake felt his jaw tighten. Behind him, Lieutenant Kyle Chen gripped his weapons console. Kyle was young and eager, barely past his training. His knuckles turned white as he held on tight. Jake spoke carefully. "High Legate Zrath, we thank you for your interest, but humans do not surrender our freedom to anyone. Perhaps we can meet and talk about working together as equals." The alien made a sound that the computer said was laughter. But it was not a pleasant sound. It made everyone on the bridge feel cold. "Working together? You do not understand your situation, Captain Morrison. Your species is very young. You have weak weapons. You have old technology. You have no friends out here. The Velcoran Empire has conquered 743 species. You are nothing special." Amy leaned forward and checked her instruments. "Captain, more ships are coming. Dozens of them. They are appearing all over the outer solar system." Jake looked at the updated display. The Velcoran fleet had just grown 3 times larger. It was a show of power. They wanted humans to see how hopeless resistance would be. But something stirred in Jake's chest. It was something every human had felt throughout history when pushed into a corner. It was the refusal to give up. "Lieutenant Chen," Jake said quietly, "turn on all weapon systems." Kyle looked back at him with confusion. "Sir, our missiles would barely scratch their shields, I know." "Do it anyway." On the screen, Zrath tilted his large head. His glowing eyes narrowed. "Captain Morrison, surely you are not foolish enough to resist? We have scanned your ship. Your weapons are old. Your shields barely work. We could destroy your ship in seconds." Jake stood up from his chair. He walked closer to the screen. When he spoke, his voice carried weight. "High Legate Zrath, let me tell you something about humans. Yes, we are young. Our ships are slow. Our weapons are weak. By any logical thinking, we should surrender right now. But there is something you need to understand about us. Something your sensors cannot measure and your computers cannot calculate." He paused, letting the silence grow. "We do not give up easily. Humanity has a saying from our history. Give me liberty or give me death. You offer us chains dressed up as partnership. You threaten to destroy us if we refuse. Well, High Legate, the United Earth government has authorized me to give you our answer." Jake stood as tall as he could. "No. Our answer is no. If you want Earth, you will have to go through every ship, every station, and every human who can hold a weapon. And I promise you this, we will make you pay for every inch of space." Zrath stared at him for a long moment. Then the alien's face twisted into what might have been a smile. "How interesting. Very well, Captain Morrison. The Velcoran Empire accepts your declaration of war. You have 24 hours to change your mind. After that, we will show you why 743 species chose to surrender instead of being destroyed." The screen went black. The bridge fell into shocked silence. Amy was the first to speak. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Sir, what have we done?" Jake turned to face his crew. Every pair of eyes was on him. Young Kyle at weapons, Amy at communications, Navigator Ben Torres, who was only 25 and fresh from the academy, Chief Engineer Linda Hayes, who had worked with Jake for 15 years. They were all young and vulnerable, but as he looked at each of them, he saw something that Zrath had missed. He saw determination. He saw courage. He saw the human spirit that had carried their species through every challenge in their history. "What we have done, Lieutenant, is chosen to stand up for ourselves. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them what happened here. Tell them to prepare for war." And tell them that the Pioneer will hold this position for as long as we can. If we are going to teach the galaxy about humanity, we might as well start now. What lesson is that, sir? Ben Torres asked. Jake returned to his command chair and sat down. His eyes stayed fixed on the alien fleet displayed on the screen. Never underestimate humans. The crew began their work with new energy. Amy sent the message to Earth. Kyle checked and rechecked the weapon systems even though he knew they were weak compared to the alien ships. Ben plotted defensive positions. Linda went down to engineering to make sure the engines would keep running no matter what happened. Jake sat alone in his chair, watching the alien fleet. He knew the odds. He knew that mathematically, logically, scientifically, the Pioneer had no chance of survival. The Velcoran Empire had weapons that could crack planets. They had shields that could stop anything humans could throw at them. They had experience from hundreds of wars against hundreds of species, but they had never fought humans before. Hours passed. The alien fleet held position, waiting for humanity's response. On Earth, emergency meetings were held. Military commanders argued. Politicians debated. Scientists calculated probabilities of survival. The numbers were not good. Earth had 42 ships that could fight. Most were converted mining vessels or patrol craft. Against 300 Velcoran warships, each more powerful than anything humans had built, the outcome seemed certain. But humanity had something the Velcorans did not understand. Something that could not be measured or predicted. Humans had the ability to look at impossible odds and say, "We will try anyway." Jake received the response from Earth Command 18 hours after his confrontation with Zrath. It was simple and direct. All human forces were authorized to engage the enemy. Rules of engagement were suspended. Any tactic, any strategy, any method of fighting was approved. In other words, Earth was telling its defenders to fight dirty, to cheat, to break every rule of civilized warfare if it meant survival. Jake smiled grimly. That was something humans could do very well. As the 24-hour deadline approached, the crew of the Pioneer made their preparations. They knew they would probably die, but they also knew their sacrifice would mean something. Every second they delayed the alien fleet was another second for Earth to prepare. Every piece of data they collected about Velcoran tactics was information that could save lives later. Linda came up from engineering. She stood beside Jake's chair and said quietly, "The engines are ready. I have pushed them as far as they will go. When you need speed, you will have it once, maybe twice. After that, we will be flying on hope and spare parts." Jake nodded. "That will be enough." The deadline arrived. On the screen, High Legate Zrath appeared again. His glowing eyes seemed brighter, more intense. "Captain Morrison, your 24 hours have ended. What is your decision?" Jake stood up. Behind him, his crew stood as well. They stood together, united, ready. "Our decision, High Legate, is the same as it was yesterday. No. We will not surrender. We will not become your slaves. If you want to fight, then come and fight. But know this. Every human who dies today will be remembered. And we will make sure the galaxy remembers that the Velcoran Empire learned a hard lesson." "And what lesson is that?" Zrath asked. Jake smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. Never underestimate humans. Admiral Lisa Grant stood in the command center of Luna Station. She was 52 years old with silver hair pulled back tight. Her sharp blue eyes watched the moving lights on the display screen. Each light was a ship. The red lights were Velcoran warships moving toward Earth. Commander Greg Palmer stood at the tactical station. He was a stocky man with a thick beard. He had fought in the Mars Defense Force for many years. "Admiral, the alien fleet is moving at 0.7 light speed. They will be in weapons range in 42 minutes. "Good," Lisa said. "That gives us time to set up our surprise." She turned to her communications officer. "Lieutenant Harris, connect me to all fleet units." A moment later, her voice was transmitted to every human ship and station in the solar system. "All hands. This is Admiral Grant. In about 40 minutes, the Velcoran Empire will learn something important about humanity. They think we are weak because we have old technology. They think we are simple because we have not conquered other species. They think they will win easily because they have never lost a war." She paused to let her words sink in. "They are about to learn that humans do not fight fair. We do not follow their rules. We do not give up when the odds are against us. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you underestimate humans. Execute Protocol Chaos. Across the solar system, human crews began their work. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the Pioneer as hundreds of objects suddenly came to life. They looked like broken satellites and pieces of destroyed ships floating in space. But they were not debris. They were nuclear mines, carefully hidden along the path the Velcoran fleet would take. It was an old trick from ancient naval battles on Earth, now adapted for space warfare. The mines are active and tracking, Kyle Chen reported. He could not hide his fierce grin. They are going to fly right into our trap. The Velcoran fleet advanced with confidence. Aboard the flagship Eternal Dominion, High Legate Zrath reviewed the battle plans. The human fleet had 42 vessels. Most were converted mining ships. Against his 300 warships, each one powerful enough to crack a planet, the result was certain. Sub-Commander Vrex, give me a status report, Zrath ordered. His second-in-command looked at the displays. The humans are holding their positions. No retreat, no reinforcements. They simply wait. This is unusual for a species about to be destroyed. They have accepted their fate, Zrath replied. Prepare to attack on my command. Full bombardment. No survivors. We will make Earth an example that will be remembered across the galaxy for 1,000 years. That was when the first mine exploded. The nuclear explosion was weak compared to Velcoran technology. Their shields absorbed it easily, but it was not alone. Hundreds of mines went off at the same time in a carefully planned sequence. The electromagnetic pulses did not destroy the Velcoran ships, but they did something the Empire had not experienced in centuries. They disrupted their systems. For a moment. Just briefly, but it was enough. Report, Zrath shouted as alarms sounded across the bridge. Multiple impacts across the fleet. Shields are fluctuating. Sensors are disrupted. Communications are interrupted. Analysis shows deliberate electromagnetic warfare, Vrex responded. His voice was tight with confusion. They are using crude nuclear devices as area weapons. Before Zrath could respond, the human fleet attacked. But they did not fight the way any civilized species would fight. The Pioneer and 24 other ships accelerated straight toward the Velcoran formation at maximum speed. No evasive moves, no tactical coordination. They simply charged forward like ancient cavalry, firing all their weapons. They are conducting suicide runs, Vrex said in shock. This is madness. Aboard the Pioneer, Jake Morrison held tight to his chair as the ship shook from weapons fire. The Velcorans were recovering from the electromagnetic pulse, but human ships were already among them, too close for their big weapons to track properly. All hands brace for impact, Jake shouted. Linda, give me everything the engines have. From engineering, Linda Hayes responded. Jake, if I push them any harder, we are going to tear ourselves apart. Good. That is exactly what we want them to think. Jake turned to Kyle. Target their shield generators. Fire everything we have. I do not care if we only scratch the paint. I want them to feel us. The Pioneer slashed across the front of a Velcoran cruiser. Its missiles launched at point-blank range. The warheads were weak compared to alien defenses, but they were hitting places that were not designed to be shot at such close range. One missile destroyed a sensor array. Another disabled a maneuvering thruster. Small victories. Minor damage. But when 24 human ships were doing the same insane tactics, the total effect could not be ignored. The Velcoran formation broke apart. Their beautiful, precise battle lines fell into chaos as ship captains tried to avoid the human vessels that seemed determined to ram them. On Luna Station, Admiral Grant watched the chaos with grim satisfaction. Phase 2, she ordered. Deploy the swarm. From hidden launch bays around Earth orbit, thousands of small drones activated. They were barely more than engines with explosives attached. Each one was controlled by a simple computer with one instruction. Find the biggest target and hit it as hard as possible. The Velcoran defense systems were designed to stop missiles and torpedoes. They struggled against the huge number of incoming drones. For every 10 drones destroyed, 1 or 2 got through, slamming into shields, hull armor, and engine ports. Each drone alone was like a tiny insect, but together they were like a school of piranhas. Aboard the Eternal Dominion, High Legate Zrath stared at the tactical display. He felt something he had not experienced in 300 years of military service. Uncertainty. Report fleet casualties, he demanded. Vrex checked his displays. 12 ships damaged, 4 shields compromised, 2 vessels reporting engine problems. Total combat effectiveness reduced by 8%. 8%. It did not sound like much. The Velcoran Empire could easily absorb such losses, but it was 8% more casualties than they had suffered in their last 40 campaigns, combined, against a species that should have been destroyed in the first attack poll. Back to defensive formations, Wrath ordered. His voice lacked its earlier confidence. We need to study this situation. These humans fight without honor, without logic, without any normal warfare rules. Shall I transmit a surrender demand? Rex asked. Wrath was silent for a long time. He watched as another wave of human drones swarmed toward his fleet. No. I do not think these humans understand surrender. We may have made an error in our first judgment of them. What error, High Legate? Wrath turned away from the display. His glowing eyes dimmed slightly. We assumed that a primitive species could not be dangerous. We forgot that the most desperate predators are often the most deadly. Back on the Pioneer, Jake Morrison allowed himself a moment of tired victory as the Velcoran fleet moved back beyond weapons range. We hurt them, Amy Carson said. Her voice was filled with wonder. We actually hurt them. We surprised them, Jake corrected. But they will adapt. They will learn, and when they come back, they will be ready for our tricks. So what do we do? Ben Torres asked. Jake looked at his tired crew. Behind them, Earth hung in space, a blue planet that had given birth to a species that refused to accept defeat. We come up with new tricks, because that is what humans do best. We adapt, we improvise, we overcome. He smiled grimly, and we never ever fight fair. The crew began checking their systems and planning their next moves. The first battle was over. They had survived. More importantly, they had proven that the Velcoran Empire was not invincible. Around the solar system, other human crews were celebrating small victories. A mining ship had disabled a Velcoran destroyer. A patrol craft had managed to destroy 3 alien fighters. Every success, no matter how small, was proof that humans could fight back. But the cost had been high. 7 human ships were destroyed. Over 300 people were dead. Luna Station had taken heavy damage. The medical facilities were overwhelmed with injured crew members. Admiral Grant looked at the casualty reports with a heavy heart. Each name represented someone who had died defending humanity. Someone's child, someone's parent, someone's friend, but they had not died for nothing. They had bought time. They had shown that resistance was possible. They had given hope to a species that had been staring into the abyss. Greg Palmer stood beside her. Admiral, the Velcorans are regrouping. They will attack again within 24 hours. We need a new strategy, Lisa nodded. Send a message to all research facilities. I want every scientist working on captured alien technology. I want every engineer thinking of new weapons. I want every tactical officer coming up with plans that the Velcorans would never expect. She looked out at the damaged but still functioning Luna Station. The Velcorans think they can predict us. They think they know how we will fight, but humans have one advantage they can never match. We can change. We can think of new ideas. We can break our own rules if it means survival. That is our strength. That is how we will win this war or die trying, Greg said quietly. Lisa smiled. Or die trying. But if we die, we will make sure the galaxy remembers that the Velcoran Empire learned a hard lesson. Never underestimate humans. Dr. Paul Chang had not slept in 36 hours. The 40-year-old scientist hunched over pieces of a broken Velcoran shield generator in the underground lab beneath Denver. His dark hair was messy and his eyes were red from exhaustion, but his mind was racing with ideas that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Paul, you need to rest, said Dr. Claire Thompson. She was in her 60s with gray hair and a caring voice. She had been Paul's professor years ago. Rest? Claire, do you see this? He pointed at the alien technology spread across his work table. This shield system works on principles we barely understand. The power it produces should be impossible according to our physics. And yet he paused, his fingers moving across a holographic screen. I think I know how to beat it. 4 months had passed since the Velcoran invasion began. 4 months of brutal fighting that had shocked the galaxy. Humanity should have fallen in days, maybe weeks. Instead, they had dug in across the solar system. Every asteroid, every moon, every piece of territory had been turned into a fortress. The cost had been terrible. Luna Station was gone, destroyed in a Velcoran attack that Admiral Grant barely survived. Mars Colony had been bombed until its protective domes cracked open. Thousands of humans had died. Their names were added to a growing memorial that seemed to expand every day, but humanity endured. And more than that, humanity learned. "Show me," Claire said, moving closer to his workstation. Paul brought up a computer simulation. The Velcoran shields work by creating a harmonic frequency that disrupts incoming energy. Their technology is about 10,000 years ahead of ours. But you know what they do not have? Creativity. Their shields are perfect, optimized, improved over thousands of years. They protect against every known threat in the galaxy. He smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile, which means they have never encountered a threat they did not expect. Watch this. The simulation showed a Velcoran shield being hit by a series of rapid pulses at random frequencies. At first the shield held, then tiny gaps appeared in the defensive field for microseconds. In the world of computer-guided weapons, that was more than enough time. You found a way to exploit their perfection, Claire said quietly. By being deliberately imperfect, exactly. Their shields are designed to counter advanced, predictable weapons. Our solution is to be neither advanced nor predictable. We hit them with weapons that should not work, fired at times that make no tactical sense, from angles they would never expect. Paul laughed, a sound full of exhaustion and triumph. We are teaching the galaxy that there is a difference between advanced and effective. Meanwhile, aboard the human command ship Defiance, Admiral Lisa Grant was conducting a very different kind of war. She sat in a temporary studio that had been built in one of the cargo bays. She faced a camera that would send her message across dozens of star systems. Commander Greg Palmer stood beside the camera. "Admiral, are you sure about this? Broadcasting on open channels is risky. The Velcorans will intercept this." "That is the point, Greg," Lisa replied. She had aged in the past months. Her silver hair now had streaks of white. Her face showed lines from the burden of command. But her eyes remained sharp and calculating. "We cannot beat the Velcoran Empire alone. But what if we do not have to?" The camera light turned green and Lisa began speaking. "My name is Admiral Lisa Grant of the United Earth Defense Force. I am sending this message to all species currently under Velcoran control. For centuries, you have been told that resistance is impossible, that the Velcoran Empire cannot be beaten, that your only choice is obedience." She paused, letting her words carry weight. "I am here to tell you that this is a lie. Humanity is a young species. Our technology is primitive. Our fleet is small. By every measure, we should have been conquered on the first day of this war, and yet 4 months later we still fight. We have hurt them. We have damaged their ships. We have killed their soldiers. The Velcoran Empire is not invincible. They can be hurt. They can be beaten." She leaned forward, her voice becoming intense. "They made a mistake when they threatened Earth. They forgot that freedom is not a gift to be given or taken away. It is a right worth dying for, and if a species as weak as humanity can stand against them, what could you accomplish? What could all of us accomplish together?" The transmission ended. Greg looked at her with concern. "The Velcorans are going to be furious. Good, let them be furious. Angry enemies make mistakes." The reaction across Velcoran-controlled space was immediate and powerful. On the industrial world of Kelthara, workers in the massive factories stopped to watch the human transmission. On the mining colonies of the Draxus system, slaves whispered among themselves about the species that dared to say no. And aboard the Eternal Dominion, High Legate Zrath watched the human admiral deliver her message with growing worry. "This is psychological warfare," Subcommander Vrex said. "They are trying to undermine our authority among the client species." "It is working," Zrath replied quietly. "We have reports of trouble on 14 worlds. Production quotas are not being met. There have been incidents of sabotage." He turned away from the screen, showing Admiral Grant. His glowing eyes dimmed with something. That might have been respect or fear. "The humans have discovered something we forgot long ago. They understand that wars are not won only with weapons. They fight on multiple fronts: military, technological, psychological. They are turning our own empire against us. They are using our size as a weakness rather than a strength. What do you recommend, High Legate?" Zrath was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke words that would have been unthinkable 4 months ago. "I recommend we reconsider our assessment of humanity. These are not primitives to be conquered. These are a species that may be more dangerous than any we have encountered, not because of what they are, but because of what they inspire in others." Back on Earth, in his lab beneath Denver, Dr. Paul Chang finally let himself collapse into a chair. The new shield-breaking weapon design was complete and ready for production. In 6 weeks, the fleet would have a weapon that could hurt the Velkorans in ways they never anticipated. Claire Thompson handed him a cup of coffee. He accepted it gratefully. "We are going to win this, are we not?" she asked. Paul took a long drink before answering. "When I do not know. The Velkorans still outnumber us. They still have better technology. In any conventional fight, we should lose." He smiled fiercely. But this stopped being a conventional fight the moment they threatened Earth. Now it is about something more important than victory. It is about proving that no empire, no matter how powerful, can crush the human spirit. And in that battle, we have already won. We just need to make sure the rest of the galaxy knows it. Across human-controlled space, the mood was changing. Yes, the war was hard. Yes, people were dying. Yes, the Velkoran Empire was still vastly more powerful than humanity. But something had shifted in those 4 months. Humans had stopped being afraid. They had learned that the mighty empire could bleed. They had discovered that their own creativity and stubbornness were weapons as powerful as any alien technology. In factories across Earth and Mars, workers produced new weapons at record speed. In research labs, scientists worked day and night to reverse engineer captured technology. In military academies, officers studied Velkoran tactics and looked for weaknesses. And in homes across the solar system, families mourned their dead, but also celebrated their sacrifice. Every fallen human was a hero. Every destroyed ship was a victory of defiance. The war was far from over, but humanity had proven something important. They had proven they could fight. On the Defiance, Admiral Grant reviewed intelligence reports from across the galaxy. The message she had broadcast was having effects beyond what she had hoped. 3 client species were openly questioning Velkoran authority. Production was down across dozens of worlds. There were reports of workers deliberately slowing their output. Greg Palmer read over her shoulder. "It is working. The Empire is starting to crack, Lisa agreed. But cracks can be repaired. We need to push harder. We need to show every enslaved species that the Empire can be beaten. Not just resisted, beaten. How do we do that?" Lisa looked at the tactical map showing Velkoran fleet positions. "We do what humans do best. We take risks that no sane military commander would consider. We try something so crazy that the Velkorans will never see it coming." She pointed at the largest red icon on the map. "The Eternal Dominion, the Velkoran flagship. We are going to capture High Legate Zrath." Greg stared at her. "Admiral, that is impossible. The Eternal Dominion is the most heavily defended ship in their fleet. We could not even get close to it." Lisa smiled. "That is exactly what the Velkorans will think too, which is why it might just work. Start planning, Greg. I want options on my desk in 24 hours. Impossible options. Crazy options. Options that would make any reasonable person think we have lost our minds. Because that is the advantage of being human. We are not reasonable. We are not predictable. We are not limited by what should be possible. We are only limited by what we are willing to try." Greg saluted and left to begin planning. Lisa turned back to the tactical display. The war was entering a new phase. The Velkorans had learned that humans could defend themselves. Now it was time to teach them that humans could also attack, and if the plan worked, the entire galaxy would see that the Velkoran. The bridge of the Pioneer had been repaired 3 times in the past 6 months. Each time they used parts from destroyed ships and makeshift systems. But Captain Jake Morrison would not trade his damaged vessel for any perfect warship in the galaxy. The Pioneer had earned its scars, and so had its crew. "Captain, we are receiving the go signal from Admiral Grant," Lieutenant Amy Carson reported. Her voice was steady now, hardened by months of combat. "Operation Last Stand is a go," Jake nodded. His eyes scanned the tactical display. Before him was what remained of the human fleet. 27 ships, most of them damaged. All of them crewed by people who had lost friends, family, and homes to the Velkoran assault. But they were still fighting, still standing, and they were about to do something impossible. "Kyle, status on the new weapons?" Jake asked. Lieutenant Kyle Chen grinned. His hands moved confidently over his weapons console. "The frequency disruptors are loaded and ready, sir. Dr. Chang says they will punch through Velkoran shields. Or he is fairly confident. Mostly confident that will have to do. Ben, plot us a course to intercept the Eternal Dominion. Linda, I need every bit of speed you can give me." From engineering, Linda Hayes responded with her usual bluntness. Jake, if I push these engines any harder, we are going to leave a trail of parts behind us. Perfect. The Velcorans will think we are falling apart. We are falling apart. Then we will fit right in with the rest of the fleet. Execute. The human fleet accelerated toward the Velcoran battle line in a formation that looked like chaos. Ships traveled at different speeds on slightly different paths. It looked like desperation. It was bait. Aboard the Eternal Dominion, High Legate Zrath watched the human advance with tired resignation. 6 months of war had changed him. His crystalline features seemed duller now. Those glowing eyes held shadows that had not been there before. They come at us again, Sub-Commander Vrek said. Shall I order the fleet to engage? No, something is different this time. The humans are too confident. They know they cannot win a direct fight. This is a trap. Zrath leaned forward, studying the tactical display. But what kind of trap? He got his answer when the human fleet opened fire at extreme range. The new weapons looked like modified missile pods. They fired rapidly, sending streams of energy toward the Velcoran ships. At first the shields held just as they always had. Then, with a flicker that was almost invisible, gaps appeared in the defensive fields, and through those gaps poured conventional human weapons. Nuclear missiles, kinetic rounds, electromagnetic pulses. Everything humanity had thrown at the Velcorans for 6 months suddenly effective. Shields are failing. Vrek shouted. Multiple hull breaches across the fleet. How are they doing this? Zrath understood immediately. The humans had found a way to exploit the one weakness the Velcoran Empire never expected. Their shields were too refined, too perfect, too optimized. They had no defense against weapons that should not work. Full retreat, Zrath ordered. Reform the battle line beyond their weapons range. We need to analyze these new tactics before we can counter them. But the human fleet did not give him time to think. The Pioneer and 5 escort ships broke formation. They accelerated toward the Eternal Dominion on what could only be described as a suicide run. On the Pioneer's bridge, Jake Morrison felt the ship shake as Velcoran weapons found their target. Shields at 40%, Kyle reported. We are not going to make it through their defensive perimeter. We do not need to make it through. We just need to make them think we are trying. Jake turned to Amy. Send the signal. Behind the Pioneer, hidden among the wreckage of a destroyed supply ship, a dozen human commandos in powered armor had been waiting. As the Pioneer drew all attention toward itself, they activated their systems and launched toward the Eternal Dominion from an unexpected angle. Leading them was Sergeant Carl Martinez. He was a veteran of the Mars Defense Force who had lost his entire family in the first Velcoran bombardment. He did not speak as his team approached the alien flagship. There was nothing left to say. Only actions mattered now. The commandos breached the hull using shaped charges that Dr. Chang had designed specifically to cut through Velcoran armor. Alarms blared throughout the Eternal Dominion as human soldiers poured into corridors that had never been designed for internal combat. What followed was brutal close-quarters fighting that shocked the Velcoran crew. This was not the sophisticated space battles they had trained for. This was raw, violent combat where humans used every advantage they had: endurance, adaptability, and a willingness to take risks that bordered on madness. Carl and his team fought their way to the bridge, leaving devastation behind them. When they burst through the final door, they found High Legate Zrath standing alone. His guards had fled or been killed. For a long moment, human and Velcoran simply stared at each other. You should have surrendered, Zrath said quietly. You should have accepted client status. This war has cost your species dearly. Carl lowered his weapon slightly. And you should never have underestimated humans. High Legate Zrath, by the authority of the United Earth Government, I am placing you under arrest. You are now a prisoner of war. The news of Zrath's capture spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. In Velcoran-controlled space, 3 client species that had been wavering finally made their choice. The Kelthera workers abandoned their factories. The Draxus miners sabotaged their own operations. The Parathi, who had been conquered 2 centuries ago, launched attacks on Velcoran military installations. Rebellion spread like wildfire. Not because these species suddenly gained military strength, but because humanity had shown them something they had forgotten. That freedom was worth fighting for no matter the odds. On Earth, in the restored command center beneath Geneva, Admiral Lisa Grant received a transmission from the Velcoran War Council. It was not a demand for Zrath's return. It was not a threat of revenge. It was a request for peace negotiations. Commander Greg Palmer read the transmission twice, unable to believe the words. Admiral, they are asking for peace terms. Not demanding, asking. Lisa allowed herself a smile, the first genuine one in 6 months. Of course they are. They finally understand what we have been trying to tell them from the beginning. What is that? That humans do not surrender. We do not break. We do not give up. You can kill us. You can defeat us in battle. You can destroy our ships and our homes, but you cannot make us accept chains. And in trying to conquer us, they awakened every other species they had conquered. She turned to face Greg. They did not just lose a war. They lost their empire, so what do we do now? Lisa looked out at Earth, scarred but unbroken, still turning peacefully in space. Now we teach the galaxy a new rule. The Velkorans broke the oldest one. Never underestimate humans. It is time they learned what happens when humans stop being underestimated. Across the solar system, humans celebrated their victory. Not because the war was over. Not because all their problems were solved. But because they had proven something important. They had proven that courage mattered more than technology. That determination could overcome superior force. That a species fighting for its survival could accomplish the impossible. On the Pioneer, Jake Morrison gathered his crew in the mess hall. They were exhausted, battered, and still processing everything that had happened. But they were alive. Against all odds, they had survived. I want to say something, Jake began. 6 months ago, we were just a mining ship crew. We had no military training, no combat experience. By any reasonable standard, we should have died in the first battle. He looked at each of them. Amy, who had kept communications running even when enemy fire was tearing through the hull. Kyle, who had fired weapons with precision despite fear. Ben, who had navigated through impossible situations. Linda, who had kept the engines running when they should have exploded. But we did not die. We fought, we adapted. We survived. Not because we were the best or the strongest or the most advanced, but because we refused to give up. Because we are human, and that means something. The crew was silent for a moment. Then Amy spoke quietly. What happens now, Captain? Jake smiled. Now we rebuild. We help negotiate a real peace. We make sure that what we fought for actually means something, and we make sure the galaxy never forgets the lesson we taught them. Never underestimate humans, Kyle said. Never underestimate humans, Jake agreed. In the brig of the Defiance, High-Legate Zrath sat alone in his cell. For the first time in 300 years of military service, he had time to think. Time to reflect on the war and what it meant. The Velkoran Empire had conquered 743 species. Some had fought. Some had surrendered immediately. But all had eventually accepted their place in the Empire, except humans. Humans had done something unprecedented. They had not just resisted. They had inspired. They had shown other species that the Empire could be beaten. In doing so, they had started a chain reaction that would change the entire galaxy. Zrath realized something profound. The Velkoran Empire had made its greatest mistake not in attacking Earth. The mistake was in believing that might made right. That superior technology meant superiority in all things. That other species would always submit to power. Humans had taught the galaxy a different lesson. That spirit mattered. That freedom was worth any cost. That even the smallest, weakest species could change the course of history if they... 1 year. 365 days since the Velkoran fleet first appeared in human space with demands of surrender. 365 days of war, sacrifice, and change that had reshaped the galaxy in ways no one could have predicted. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck of the newly built Unity Station. He watched as ships from a dozen different species arrived for the first session of the Galactic Coalition Council. His reflection in the window showed a man who had aged more than 1 year should explain. Gray filled his hair now and lines marked his face, but his eyes were alive with something that had been missing before the war. Purpose. Captain Morrison. The voice behind him was easy to recognize, even through the translation computer. Jake turned to face High-Legate Zrath, who now held the title of ambassador to the coalition. The former military commander of the Velkoran fleet looked different than he had a year ago. His crystalline features seemed softer. The glow in his eyes held something Jake had never expected to see. Respect. Ambassador Zrath, Jake replied, nodding slightly. I hear your people are making progress on the reparations agreement. Progress. Yes. Zarath moved to stand beside Jake, looking out at the assembled fleet. Though I think progress is something we Velkorans must relearn. For thousands of years we thought strength meant domination. Your species taught us that true strength lies in the courage to stand for what is right, even against impossible odds. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We lost over 2 million people in this war. Luna Station, Mars Colony, dozens of ships, families torn apart, children who will never know their parents, I know, and no amount of payment can restore what was lost. But perhaps," Zarath gestured at the ships outside, "perhaps we can ensure it was not in vain. The Kelthera are free now. The Draxus, the Pyrethy, 47 species that lived under our rule for centuries now govern themselves, because humanity showed them it was possible." Admiral Lisa Grant entered the observation deck. Her uniform was crisp despite the exhaustion that still lingered from months of negotiations. Commander Greg Palmer, now promoted to captain, walked beside her. He had been assigned as liaison to the new Coalition Defense Force. "Gentlemen," Lisa said, nodding to both Jake and Zarath. "The council session begins in 20 minutes. Are we ready?" "As ready as we will ever be," Jake replied. "Who would have thought a year ago that we would be helping to write a galactic constitution? Who would have thought a year ago that we would still be alive?" Lisa said with a slight smile. She turned to Zarath. "Ambassador, your delegation has been very helpful in the drafting process. The provisions regarding client species rights are particularly well done." Zarath's expression seemed to show bitter amusement. "I have had considerable experience with the subject, Admiral. Centuries of experience on the wrong side. It is clarifying." In the science wing of Unity Station, Dr. Paul Chang was giving a presentation to a mixed audience of human and alien researchers. His exhaustion had finally been addressed with actual sleep, though his enthusiasm had not diminished. "What you are seeing here," Paul explained, pointing at a holographic display showing combined human and Velkoran technology, "is what happens when you combine human creativity with alien sophistication. Our frequency disruptor weapons could not have existed without captured Velkoran shield generators to study. But the Velkorans never would have developed them because their thinking was too limited by conventional ideas." A Kelthera scientist asked, "Dr. Chang, are you saying that technological advancement requires not just knowledge, but also the willingness to think unconventionally?" "Exactly," Paul beamed. "The Velkoran Empire stopped growing because they perfected their technology. Perfection sounds great, but it leaves no room for adaptation, for evolution, for the kind of desperate innovation that happens when a species fights for survival." He grinned. "Humans are very good at desperate innovation. It is practically our motto," the alien scientist laughed. It was a sound that would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. Humans and their former enemies sharing a moment while working together on the future. As the council session began, representatives from 53 species gathered in the main chamber. Humans sat beside Velkorans. Kelthera delegates debated with Pyrethy ambassadors. The Draxus, who had been slaves just months ago, now had a voice in galactic government. Admiral Grant stood at the central podium. Her voice carried across the chamber and beyond, transmitted to billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. "Honored delegates, we gather here today not as conquerors or conquered, not as masters or servants, but as equals. The Galactic Coalition represents something that has never existed in this part of space. A voluntary association of free peoples united not by force but by shared ideals." She paused, looking around the chamber at faces human and alien, familiar and strange. A year ago, the Velkoran Empire made a mistake. They assumed that because humanity was young, we were weak. Because our technology was primitive, we were irrelevant. Because we had never conquered other species, we lacked the will to fight. They broke the oldest rule in the galaxy: never underestimate humans. Sounds of agreement filled the chamber, but today we write a new rule. A better rule. One that states no species, regardless of its technology or its history or its military might, has the right to dominate another. That freedom is not a privilege granted by the powerful, but a fundamental right of all thinking beings. That the measure of a civilization is not in how many worlds it controls, but in how it treats those who cannot defend themselves. She looked directly at the Velkoran delegation, where Zarath sat among his former subordinates who had chosen to support the new order. "We have all paid a terrible price to learn these lessons. Humans, Velcorans, Kelthara, Draxus, Pyrathi, and 48 other species represented here today. We have bled together, suffered together, and now we will build together. Not an empire, not a dominion, but a coalition where strength comes from unity, not subjugation. The chamber erupted in applause. Different sounds from dozens of species expressing approval in their own ways. Later, as the formal session ended, Jake found himself back in the observation deck. This time he was joined by his crew from the Pioneer. Kyle Chen, Amy Carson, Ben Torres, and Linda Hayes stood together, watching as ships departed Unity Station to return to their homes. "It is hard to believe," Amy said softly. "A year ago we were just a mining ship crew. Now we are part of something that spans the galaxy." "We were always part of something bigger," Jake replied. "We just did not know it yet. Every human who refused to surrender, every scientist who worked around the clock, every soldier who held the line. We did not win because we were strong. We won because we refused to lose." Linda leaned against the railing. "You know, I have been thinking about why the Velcorans lost. It was not just our tactics or our weapons or even our stubbornness." "What was it then?" Ben asked. "They forgot something fundamental. They had been the dominant power for so long that they stopped questioning their assumptions. They looked at humanity and saw primitives. They never considered that maybe being primitive meant we had nothing to lose and everything to fight for. They underestimated us not because they were stupid, but because they had forgotten what it means to be desperate." Kyle laughed. "Desperation as a strategy? I like it. Very human indeed," agreed a voice behind them. Dr. Paul Chang had entered the observation deck. Dr. Claire Thompson was beside him. "Which is why I've been asked to establish the Coalition Institute for Adaptive Technology. Turns out the entire galaxy wants to learn how humans think. Be careful what you teach them, Paul," Jake warned with a smile. "We do not want to make it too easy for someone else to beat us at our own game." "Actually, I hope they do," Paul said seriously. "Competition breeds innovation. If other species start thinking like humans, we will have to think even better. It is a race of ideas instead of weapons. I cannot think of a better way to push civilization forward." Admiral Grant joined them, having finished her diplomatic duties for the day. She looked tired but satisfied. A commander who had guided her people through their darkest hour and emerged on the other side. "I have been thinking about a memorial," she said, "for everyone we lost. Every human who died defending Earth. Every Velcoran who realized the Empire was wrong and turned against it. Every freed slave who paid the ultimate price for liberation." "What did you have in mind?" Jake asked. "Something simple. A monument here on Unity Station with a single inscription. They broke the oldest rule in the galaxy. Never underestimate humans." The group fell silent, thinking about those words. Finally, Amy spoke. "What about after that? What is the second rule?" Jake smiled, looking out at the stars that humanity had finally truly joined. "The second rule? That is easy. Never give humans a reason to prove you wrong about the first rule." Laughter filled the observation deck. Human voices joined by the echo of a galaxy that had learned what it meant when a species refused to accept defeat. The Velcoran Empire was gone, replaced by something better. Something that recognized the strength and diversity, the power and freedom, and the truth that had been written across the solar system. Never underestimate humans, because when pushed to the edge, when faced with impossible odds, when given the choice between surrender and extinction, humanity would always choose a third option.